Hi there. I'm going to cover many topics in this presentation, so please do not hesitate to use the Google form to ask me any questions for clarification, and I'll also add my email address in the final slide. The QR code connects to my papers on ResearchGate, some of which I'll mention in this presentation. This is today's pathway. This slide will appear at the beginning of each transition. So this definition of CTS, capacity to speak, it differs to WTC, willingness to communicate, which is being used a lot in research in Japan and elsewhere. WTC refers to more abstract motivational variables, and there is the underlying assumption that students are willing to communicate. WTC also covers a much wider area of communication, including writing. In contrast, CTS, capacity to speak, it focuses on speaking, but it also includes silence. Many teachers have faced this problem in Japan, and we want to understand the underlying causes of silence and factors that can also encourage speaking. During study abroad, speaking is important for making friends and succeeding academically, as students are quite often evaluated on their spoken participation. So Yakudoku is a form of teacher-centered grammar translation where Japanese is used mostly, and this is often blamed for student silence because there are very few opportunities to speak in Japanese classrooms of this style. In classroom observations for one of my earlier studies, when teachers attempted to use English in the classroom and nominated students to speak, the students resisted by replying in Japanese, using silence or extended pauses, or using Japanese katakana pronunciation. Other studies have also widely reported student resistance, and this may make it harder for teachers to move away from Yakudoku. I can email this book chapter on request. Anyway, with my colleagues, I did a large-scale CTS survey of high school majors and non-majors. I'll briefly outline the results of factors underlying silence or speaking. Once again, I can send you this book chapter on request. On this slide, you can see the factors underlying capacity to speak, CTS, and their strengths on the structural equation model, but unfortunately this model didn't fit, so we reduced the variables. Confidence is the strongest variable influencing CTS, followed by classroom support. The use of English by others in the classroom and experience outside class also have indirect influences. I'll use this CDST framework that is defined succinctly by Ellis in the slide. Dernier compares CDST to the movement of a double pendulum, where the ongoing interference between different components makes the system's behavior complex and unpredictable. Larsen-Freeman introduced CDST to applied linguistics, and she recommends a retrodictive approach where we look back on behavior longitudinally, where it's set up to capture variability at various levels and timescales, from the general shape of the development process over a long period of time to the short-term variability that takes place between data collection intervals. 6 students volunteered for the study. I report 3 participants who faced and overcame challenges to their speaking. All 3 were female English majors at a large private university with a compulsory study abroad program in the second year. I taught them in their first year. 2 students studied in America and 1 in the UK during the study abroad. And it lasted for roughly 10 months in line with the Japanese academic year. Therefore, they arrived in the spring and began taking language skills classes with other international students. They all improved enough during this period to qualify for undergraduate classes in the autumn with local students. They had 2 interviews, 1 interview during their study abroad and 1 roughly a year after finishing. The interviews were in English, recorded and transcribed. The interviews were based on retrospective CTS graphs where they plotted if their CTS was positive or negative over time. Also, I based it on reflective journals that they wrote frequently during study abroad, where they noted moments where their CTS was high or low and the reasons why. The final interview explored their responses to a questionnaire based on the earlier study by Humphries, Akamatsu, Tanaka and Burns 2020. These are the research questions. All 3 have a high international posture in regards to English as an international language. It's important, and it's important for communicating with foreigners and for getting a future job, although they were all quite vague about what job they would do in the future. All 3, as you can see, actively use English outside the class. Ruika and Kumi have high anxiety about expressing themselves, standing out and making mistakes. Yumi has less anxiety. As a result, she's more comfortable in class, but her CTS decreased after the study abroad. Kumi is a bit like 2 different people in a way. Her CTS is high socially with international students in the dorm in Japan, but low with them in class as she perceives herself differently in these situations in relation to the other people. All 3 students had heavy baggage at junior high school where their CTS was low. Ruika improved her CTS through patient teachers at high school and cram school who improved her grammatical confidence. Yumi and Kumi increased their confidence through exchange programs, speaking with foreign students. All 3 students also studied hard to improve. After entering university, all 3 had some confidence issues. Ruika and Kumi both compared their own speaking negatively with classmates, which hindered their CTS. But Ruika did appreciate the opportunities to talk, and Kumi saw role models. In the case of Yumi, she fluctuated in her CTS. It depended on the topic that they spoke about. Okay, now I'll concentrate on the main focus. The student study abroad, each student in turn, starting with Ruika. I visited Ruika for her first interview a month before the end of her study abroad, where she plotted her CTS back from that November to her school days, university in Japan, and her time in America. Overall, you can see that before her study abroad, it was a bit of a roller coaster as she faced setbacks during her first years of junior high and high school when she sometimes hated the subject or her teacher, which caused negative CTS. Her CTS at university in Japan was fairly stable both before and after study abroad. She was clearly more confident though in her speaking after her study abroad than she had been before. Zooming in on her CTS during study abroad, she felt that her CTS increased quickly at the beginning in March and April. She made many friends through 3 main sources: Vietnamese friends, members of an African drum club, and the Asian American Union. Her CTS fell in May to July, which was the summer holiday. The local students went home, so she hung out with other Japanese. In August, the locals returned, she made new friends, and her CTS rose again. I'll cover these 4 categories in the following slides. I must admit I was pleased that Ruika volunteered for my study about speaking because she looked the most uncomfortable in the small group discussions in my class before study abroad. In the interviews and journals during the study abroad, it became clear that she didn't like hanging out socially in groups, but this helped her English speaking in America. She pointed out that Japanese classmates spoke Japanese in a group, but she was alone, so foreigners spoke to her. During study abroad, she separated it between socially and in class. Socially, she avoided groups, but she found group discussions okay in class. Ruika could speak well when there were shared topics. Sometimes the interest was from her side. She joined the African Drum Club and made many friends due to her interest in music and African fashion. Moreover, the interest also came to her. She joined the Asian American Union, where students asked her questions about anime, which she admitted to actually know little about. But communication could take place. Also, her roommates loved talking. They'd been to Japan and loved Japanese culture, but they couldn't speak much Japanese, so that was good. Ruika felt very self-conscious about her mistakes or her level in comparison to other speakers. Therefore, she cared a great deal about using correct grammar, and she felt anxiety about speaking in front of Japanese and other international students in America who were more proficient than her. In contrast with native English speakers, she felt some anxiety when they didn't understand her pronunciation, but she also found that her CTS increased with them generally when they were friendly and kind. She thought that sympathetic native speakers tended not to mind if she didn't speak well. In particular, Ruika wanted understanding from native speakers, and this was particularly important with teachers. She was the first international student to take an American history class. The teacher treated her the same as local students, so her CTS actually fell. In contrast, in the Chinese ethics class, Ruika felt nervous alongside more proficient international students, but her professor showed consideration, which boosted her confidence to speak. Yumi. I visited Yumi during her summer session in America for her first interview. Unlike Ruika, her CTS graph shows no major fluctuations. You can see how she improved to a neutral level before university in Japan and slightly above 0 at university, depending on the topic. She then improved her speaking during her study abroad, but it tapers off at the end. Her CTS stays fairly stable and positive after her study abroad, but lower than when she was overseas. Yumi had 2 different experiences on her CTS from travelling with Japanese friends in the USA during holidays. During her first holiday, she felt that she improved her CTS, which is shown by the sudden increase on the graph. This occurred because she was applying the English learned in classes and solving problems. Her second trip was at the end of her study abroad. She felt that her CTS fell because she was chatting in Japanese with her friends. In general, though, she has an incremental mindset. When faced by new challenges, she considers how to improve, which came out in her journals that I'll explain in some of the next slides. Yumi tends to have a lower CTS in new situations, but she has an incremental growth mindset. She knows that practicing leads to improvement. For example, she reflects early on that speaking out helps her to make friends and improve her English. So she forces herself. It could also be the influence of the journal writing for the study, but she reflects on strategies such as learning patterns for speaking in shops and applying successful speaking strategies to new situations, and a speak first, reflect later approach to avoid losing speaking opportunities. Yumi found that she could speak best when the context was predictable, such as in the skills classes with other international students. She could follow the teachers and speak out. In contrast, she struggled in unpredictable contexts, such as shopping and her first meetings with her conversation buddy. She struggled to make sentences quickly, and then the topic would change while she was composing the sentences in her mind. In general, Yumi worried about composing long sentences under time pressure because she cared about using correct grammar. As mentioned before, she developed her speak first, reflect later strategy. Also, with her Mexican host mother, Yumi felt relaxed about making grammatical and pronunciation mistakes together in English. So Yumi transferred this experience from her host mother to boost her speaking in classes with other international students. As mentioned earlier, Yumi struggled in spontaneous conversations as topics would change continuously, and said that she didn't feel brave enough to talk with locals because she felt anxious about both her opinions and her English level. In contrast, she enjoyed the relaxed atmosphere in classes with international students, so her CTS increased. She became accustomed to the accents of the international students and felt close to them. They had the same English level and shared culture, especially students from Taiwan and China. Kumi had her first interview during a difficult time in her study abroad. It was in October when she had begun her undergraduate classes. Overall, you can see though 3 big dips: when she started university in Japan, started her study abroad, and then started the undergraduate courses. After her study abroad, her CTS dips a little from the highest points overseas, but remains stable and strongly positive. Kumi faced crises in confidence when she started her study abroad and then around the time of her first interview when she started the undergraduate courses. Despite both of these sharp dips in her CTS, she improved by working hard and changing her perceptions of other speakers, leading to increased confidence. When Kumi began her study abroad in the UK in April, she perceived disinterest from British and European students. They had no common topics and she couldn't understand them as they spoke normally to her. When she began the undergraduate classes in the autumn, she also struggled to understand the difficult terminology, and the professors spoke faster than the English teachers had previously. In group work with local students, she felt that she could not contribute due to her lack of understanding. She felt too shy to ask for clarification and therefore stayed silent. Kumi noted that in the beginning of her study abroad, she had higher CTS with Chinese friends because they shared the same culture such as food, idols and celebrities. Also, at the beginning of the study abroad, she had a short homestay. Her host mother was an alumnus from the same university, so she asked Kumi many questions about university life. Generally, Kumi had a lower CTS with British and Europeans due to a lack of shared topics of interest, but she formed an alliance with 2 French girls from the same dorm. They hung out together as quiet outsiders because the British seemed scary, always going out partying and drinking. Kumi constantly compared herself to others and reappraised herself. During her study abroad, she struggled with local British students both in classes and socially. She felt embarrassed about her language and opinions. She was too shy to ask for clarification, so she stayed silent. But after her study abroad, she discovered that she had a high CTS with British students and Europeans in the international dorm in Japan. They praised her for speaking good English, and this boosted her confidence. One theme that unpacked from her fluctuating CTS was that she felt better speaking to other language learners. She felt better with British students who were studying in Japan than monolingual British in their home country. Also, although she initially felt inadequate in the UK when with Japanese or Asians who spoke English well, she began to realise that they made mistakes but communicated. This led her to worry less about grammatical or pronunciation perfection. From this perspective, Kumi was similar to Yumi for learning. Generally, 4 trends seem to emerge. First, students' CTS tended to be higher when they knew the context of the conversation, like in a classroom, but struggled more when in unpredictable situations with spontaneous communication. Second, they felt sensitive to their perceived deficiencies in grammar and pronunciation, which reduced their CTS. However, they devised strategies to overcome these deficiencies or adapted by speaking to people who made them feel that they belonged. 3. In particular, they spoke better with people who had a shared interest in the same topics or culture. And 4th, for Yumi and Kumi, they could speak better with other language learners than monolingual English speakers. They realised that other learners make mistakes and are sympathetic. In contrast, Ruika preferred speaking to native speakers, but these were native speakers who were sympathetic with shared interests to her. At Kansai, we designed our study abroad programme based on the Japanese academic year, which means that students begin in a partner university affiliated language school and work hard to qualify for undergraduate courses that begin in about the final third of their year. Before their study abroad, students really seem to want to travel to meet the local people and learn from the new culture. And this is probably true, I think, and this experience does help them to grow. And definitely all 3 students felt more confident after their study abroad. However, in terms of CTS in the short term, it appears that students can speak better with other language learners who make mistakes, share the same goals, and have similar topics of interest. Therefore, we might accidentally have the best structure for the year for helping our students adjust overseas with other international students at the beginning before jumping into the communication with local students. Another option, of course, is to study in English in non-English speaking countries alongside other multilingual learners. I actually have a book chapter coming out about English majors studying in English in Taiwan, but that's a topic for a future presentation. Of course, feel free to email me to ask any questions. So anyway, please feel free to email me or use the QR code here if you're interested in reading some of my papers. Okay, thank you.